Good evening. We'll call this organizational meeting of the Fairborn City Schools Board of Education to order, Thursday, January 9th, 2020. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Blandino.
Present.
Mr. Browning.
Here.
Mr. McCourt.
Here.
Mrs. Reister.
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here. I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Browning.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reister.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Motion carries. We'll now move on to election of officers for the calendar year 2020. May I have nominations for the office of president, please?
I would like to nominate Pat McCourt, please.
Okay. Any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Mary Reister as vice president. Or are we there yet?
We're not there.
We're not there yet. Sorry.
Not there yet.
Anxious.
Okay. Hearing no other nominations for president, we'll close the nominations. And
Need a second on the
Oh.
Mr. McCourt.
I'll second
Second.
that.
okay.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Mr. McCourt is the president for calendar year 2020, and it is my pleasure to turn the rest of the proceedings over to Mr. McCourt.
Okay, we will now entertain motions for vice president.
I move Mary Reister as vice president of the board.
I
Thank you.
second.
Thank you, Mrs. Blandino. Thank you, Mr. Browning. No other nominations?
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next item is the Board of Educational Organizations liaisons, if you will. On page 2, you'll see a list of responsibilities and the board member who's carrying that responsibility. So with that said, may I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next item from the Treasurer's Office, request approval for the following group of resolutions pertaining to school finance. And that carries on over to midway down page 4. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Reister.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next, Superintendent's Report, Mr. Lawley.
Superintendent's
No.
office.
Oh,
Superintendent's
not the
office.
report, the office, I'm sorry. Superintendent's office is, has a list carrying over into page 5. Hearing no discussion, may I have a motion?
So moved?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Roll call?
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes.
Item 9, adjournment. It's requested the board adjourn the organizational meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Reister. Thank you, Mr. Browning. Roll call?
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. time here on adjournment?
6:05.
6:05.
We will now shift over to our January monthly regular meeting.
Okay. Again, January 9, monthly meeting, 2020. Approve the agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Blandino. And thank you, Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Blandino,
Yes.
Mr. Browning,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Reister,
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next, approve minutes of the Thursday, December 5th regular meeting and the December 9th, 2019 meeting, joint meeting with the city of Fairborn. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Reister. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And a roll call, please.
Ms. Reister,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino,
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next item, board reports, good of the order. We will start with our freshman board member, Mrs. Blandino.
Reports. I have no reports.
Good. Mrs. Reister?
All right, so in December, it was a busy, busy, crazy month, and here's what I had on my calendar that I did, so. Fairborn Primary School and Right door judging, so each of the classes who chose to participate decorated their door in the holiday theme. That was a lot of fun. I had a couple board members join me. We took Elfies, in case you didn't see that. So that was a lot of fun. The SROs did a fun video, so if you haven't seen it, you need to go look at it because it's quite comical. Personally, I think the outtakes are the best. Let's see, steering committee continues, and CAT meetings, which are for the hopefully new high school and or junior high. DARE graduation was a very big class. That was awesome to see. Zink does a great job putting that together and keeping the kids engaged. Basketball season, boys, girls, middle school, you name it, it's full swing. Winter celebration, I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, Jerry Browning. But it was great. As always, they did an amazing job bringing together the bands and the choirs. It was good. It was good stuff. So that's my December.
Mr. Wilson?
Okay, Mary stole most of my thunder on this, so, because of participation in some of those, the joint meeting with City Council, which we do maybe twice a year, is a good thing to get together so that we can talk face-to-face and know what each body is up to, particularly when it comes to putting tax levies and things on the ballot. So that we try to avoid both organizations having something on the ballot at the same time. So, and in view of the item we have, the resolution opposing the vouchers here, I'm going to read a little thing that's adopted from something that is read at our church services on Sunday. So it's, whatever your skin color, whatever your class background, whatever your range of abilities, you are welcome at public schools in Ohio. Whomever you love, wherever you were born, whatever gender you express, you are welcome at public schools in Ohio, which is not something they can necessarily say at the voucher schools and the charter schools. So that's mine.
Okay, thank you. I would like to go back to Mrs. Blandino for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. McCourt. That snuck up on me. Very quickly, I wrote out some comments, but I'm just going to tell you, I am really honored and grateful to be a part of this board. It's been an exciting, fairly brief journey back in the state and back in this city for the first time in a long time, about a year and a half ago. The cool thing about it is that I was at the high school the other day and I was in the office and I overheard a teacher explaining to the office staff, he said, "And she smiled." And he had a giant smile on his face. And I said, "What's going on? What's the story?" And he said, "I have a brand new student that's been here all year. She moved in from Wisconsin and she hasn't smiled once." he goes, "I got her to smile." And he was glowing. And so that's the kind of thing that I feel like is a great part of being a part of the Fairborn City Schools, those little moments. And so I'm excited to be a part of this and help this team and everyone celebrate those small victories as well as the big ones that we have coming up. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Browning?
Okay. Mary talked about a lot of things I went to also, which is fine. I think it's awesome that a number of us attend a lot of events all the time and, really get to see the kids is what it's all about. But winter celebration, the choir, the band, the orchestra, to me, that program every year just keeps getting better and better, and it's really fun to see the kids do that. The middle school had a number of concerts, choir, orchestra, band. They were all outstanding. Also went to the 5th grade DARE graduation, and I wanted to thank Officers, Inc. also because you can tell the role that he plays with those kids is really, really important in terms of their relationship with the police force and understanding the police and those types of things. So I think that's neat. Pat and I went to a swim meet for the first time, and that was fun. I mean, it was at the old Beaver Creek YMCA. It's now the Dayton Raiders Aquatic Center, and it's neat seeing our kids swim, seeing them support each other, those types of things. And we've got some good swimmers based on what I saw. The other thing, went to the music club meeting this week, and it's kind of neat listening to them as they prep for their trip to Disney World in April. And it's kind of cool listening to John talk about they're going to march at 6:30 in full uniform right through Magic Kingdom on the Wednesday of that week. So, that's going to be pretty exciting for them, not only to get to, go to Disney World, but also to get to march there. The last thing I wanted to say is I wanted everybody to keep Mike Cornish and his wife Melinda in their prayers. Mike had a kidney transplant last Friday, the 3rd, and the donor was his wife. And so it went well. There's a food train set up. There's a number of things taken up, and they've got family in the area to support them, but I want everybody to keep them in their prayers if they would. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Just a few comments. First of all, I would like to thank Andy Wilson for his position on this board as president for, gosh, I don't know how many years?
4 years.
4 years? But, I'm going to find out, I guess, being a president and doing this job is a lot of responsibility and a lot of extra things we have to do. But Andy was a part of the old board, and then we brought him over to the new board, or he came over to the new board. And so I think...
And life hasn't been the same.
Yeah, true. But Andy, thank you for your leadership and everything you did for us, and we appreciate what you do.
Well, you're welcome, and this is a much changed and much better place than it was 6 years ago when I first came on board.
Great, great. Also would like to thank, I attended my second CAP meeting. CAP meeting is Citizens Advisory Team meeting. And I just would like to throw out to SH&P the professionalism that those people bring to that meeting and everything they do. Mike Parkinson is with us tonight, but Mike, thank you for what you do for us and what you're going to do for us in the future. I did share a meal at the Bus Barn. They had a chili cook-off for their Christmas meal, and Mr. Lawley and I went over and visited that and partook of that meal, and what a great get-together that was. Went to my second bowling contest the other night, and we got some good kids. And if you've never been to a bowling meeting, get to one because it gets a little crazy. Kids get to shouting, parents get to cheering, and everything is good. But also, as Jerry mentioned, the swim meet, basketball games, music concerts. And lastly, I would like to remind everybody today is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, a day that I know we around this district know firsthand what they do for our kids in our buildings, you know, all of our people around. But if you do see a police officer, be certain to thank him or her for what they do, because they do a lot for our district and a lot for our kids. And it's like the DARE graduation that we attended, you know, that relationship between child, high school student, whatever, and that officer really is good to see. It's good to see, and they work hard at it, and they do a fine job for us. And I think, Mr. Lally, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think having 3 SRO officers in our district, not every district around us has that. So we thank them, and we appreciate what they do. That's all we have for good of the order. Recognition of visitors. If anybody in the audience would like to step up, address the board, please give their name and address. We will give you 5 minutes to speak. So if you have anything to say, please come forward. Seeing no one in the audience, which is always good news, to come forward. We'll move along to the school district presentations, resignation, or recognition of school board.
Man,
Mr. Lally.
supposed to give me a heads up. before
You would
I
have
get
a,
here.
you would have a bigger crowd than this if you were resigning.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Every January is School Board Recognition Month, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize our board. But first, I would like to read a statement from Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor John Husted, and it's as follows. The service provided by the members of Ohio's city, village, local, and joint vocational boards of education and educational service centers, governing boards, is critical to ensuring high-quality public education for Ohio's school children. Through partnership with teachers, school administrators, staff, and parents, school board members provide vital leadership and support for schools, and we thank you for your service and for the positive difference you make throughout our state. So on this first day of January, going back to the first day of the year, January 2020, it is School Board Recognition Month. With that, I know I speak from the entire community, our school staff, and most important, our students. Here in Fairborn, we deeply thank you for particularly what you all have done over the last 4 years in moving this district forward, from the new building construction to curriculum things that have been implemented, to areas that we have added in music and art and those types of things. And without your support, those would not have been possible. So from us, all of us here in Fairborn, we deeply appreciate your guidance and your leadership. With that, we do have a certificate from the Ohio School Boards Association, from Lee Schreiner, who is the president of the Ohio School Boards Association, and Richard Lewis, Chief Executive Officer of the Ohio School Boards. So, again, we thank you very much. Mr. Report?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Browning?
Thank you.
Mr. Landino?
Thank you.
Ms. Reister?
Thank you.
And Mr. Fitzgerald. Last. I believe next up is a facility update by Mr. Patrick and Mr. Parkinson.
I asked Mike to come tonight to give a little presentation and information about the bidding process for the intermediate school. Those bids were due on the 20th of December, and actually we are still in the process of trying to figure those out, and hopefully by the end of tonight we have an idea of what we're going to do with those and be able to hopefully accept those next week. So I'll turn it over to the mic real quick to speak about the bid process.
So the bid process, we accepted bids on December 20th. We had an advertised bid amount. Came over a little bit over what we anticipated, but within the 10%. So we're still able to look at avenues to get you there. The primary school came at roughly around $200 a square foot with all the bells and whistles. We anticipated the intermediate to come in around $207 without all the bells and whistles. There was definitely a upshift in market labor and material costs that were unanticipated, and definitely something to look for, but I think we are still able to move forward with the building process and get you on track where you need to be.
This building, the intermediate came in at about $216 per square foot. So that's quite a bit more than what the primary came in at. So we're still trying to work through that process to figure all that out. But as Mike said, it was underneath the 10%. So we can accept these bids. We just have to figure out which alternates we're going to do and so forth and move forward with that process. So overall, I think we've got a pretty good plan to move forward. And we'll hopefully accept those bids next week at a special board meeting. As far as the facility at the primary goes, we had a subcontractors meeting this morning, which we have every Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. I did attend that. Tomorrow we have a progress meeting usually that Mr. McCourt attends. Tomorrow's a special one. We've got core, we've got a building tour, so it's a big day with that. It was kind of unfortunate that the holidays fell the way they did. We had some great weather. Which we could have used those days of having laborers on site, but unfortunately with the holidays, we didn't get as much work done as what we would have liked, but that's no one's fault, but the weather was very nice. So moving forward, we do have to look at schedules. We're trying to get moved into that building on June the 15th. At this point in time, we're not that far away, and it's a real tight summer, so if for some reason we are not able to move in on the 15th, it's not like we've got a bunch of time to be able to back everything up. We do not. So as we've been yelling from day one, we've got to get in there on June the 15th to get everything done that we need to do. And the way they have shifted around doing some stuff, as you drive past, you can see that the very north end of the property is the preschool wing. That is the wing that's been the most neglected. So that we can try to finish some things off in some of the other wings to be able to close in, drywall, and actually we're doing some finish painting next week in one of the wings. So it's moving along, it's just not at the pace that we would like, but hopefully we can still meet the June 15th date. So any questions?
Just a comment, it's not surprising with the change in economic conditions that we've, over the past 3 years since we started the last one, that we have a significant uptick in costs in both material and labor, so.
Yeah, and really, if you think, we bid the elementary primary just 1 year ago.
At 200 with all the bells.
So within just the 12-month period, it's gone up that much. But I'll also say that the labor force is thin. And I think that's driving a lot of it. Yes, materials have gone up, but the labor force is thin. It's real thin.
The three areas we've seen the biggest upkick in is site work, the abatement and demo, and masonry. Those are the three biggest things that have caused the biggest. When we bid the primary, we were worried about HVAC and where those numbers came in. And when we typically will anticipate around $25 a square foot in those numbers. You came a little bit under that. And so we were anticipating a little bit more because of the uptick. And we've heard rumors out there as much as 28 for just a basic system. A nice system, but ended up coming in at 25. So the market is just kind of nuts right now as far as where it is, up and down, and where things are playing out at. So it's been challenging for say.
So Mike's here. If you guys have any questions of Mike as far as process, intermediate school, or anywhere else, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer those right now.
Just really quickly, question. At what point do those prices become locked in?
As soon as you sign the contract.
All right.
No, in all honesty, I think the 30 days or.
We have 30 days.
Yes,
Okay,
so, all the contractors, they give, what they call, I'll say a base number, okay? And then there's all those alternates on top of it. So, there's 2 requirements for signing a contract. It's not lowest bid, it's lowest responsive and responsible. So, lowest responsive is, do they have all their paperwork in? Responsible is, do they have the experience and do they have the know-how? Do they have the proper subcontractor? It's not necessarily even just the contractor itself, the general contractor, is do the subcontractors. So we go through a process of vetting the subcontractors. Do they have the wherewithal and experience on building a project of your size and magnitude? So it's that sort of layer and understanding. It's not just this person has lowest bid assigned to them. We go through a total scope review. We make sure that they understand, for example, on storefront or windows, that those contractors have certain number of years of experience, that they have the understanding of size and scope, that they have to have authorization from the manufacturers. So there is a level of what we call quality assurance, quality control, QA/QC. And we make sure that those contractors understand those things so that you're not getting somebody who decided, hey, I'm going to open up a window shop today, I'm going to do this. We want to make sure that they're meeting all those contract requirements and meeting the quality assurance and quality control, the level of proper expectation for your district and the state.
And we kind of went through that on December the 30th. I believe we had the top
Yes.
3 bidders at SHP in Cincinnati. They
5
came,
bidders, 5 GCs.
5 total. We brought back in the top 3 bids and basically broke it down. We asked them, who's going to be your masons, who's going to be your roofers, who's going to be your HVAC, and you kind of go down through there. What schools have you done? And you basically run it like an interview process, and to make sure that they do meet that quality assurance that we need.
Are these all Ohio companies that have bid on this?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No, they're not, all the guys don't live in Ohio. I know we've
Yeah.
got one guy drives from Kentucky every day, so
Yeah.
yeah. So.
Is there any assurance that the shortage in manpower regarding masons will continue on to the next project?
So right now, your lowest responsive or responsible, your current, what I would consider the most likely to get the project, is choosing a mason that has a wealth of people available, unlike maybe like on the primary. So
Right.
you should have more people on site meeting that schedule with them. And that was a long, lengthy conversation with them prior to make sure that's going to happen.
And Pat, you've been in those meetings on Friday mornings. Lots of the concern are with the masons and getting the block and the brick done and so forth. Who appears to be winning the bid at this point in time, submitted 2 names as mason companies, and both are very reputable in the state of Ohio. So I feel a lot better about those. Anything else? All right, thank you.
I would just like to say that, as Kevin mentioned, we meet every Friday morning at 8 o'clock at the construction site. Tomorrow we'll be meeting, there'll be another walkthrough of the building with that group that's out there. But I think it's worth mentioning, and I've said it before, but Jeff is staying right on top of things out there. And, we're doing the best we can to move right along. And I think I ask every meeting regarding safety, because we must work safely out there. And we have not had a lost time accident at all during the project, knock on wood. But no, the guys, I think, are working safe. And I will tell you also that yesterday I was out, we were doing some droning with Mr. Young yesterday, and we did get a few good shots of the primary building. And you can see from an aerial view that we have made progress as far as the roofs and that preschool wing. They've been setting metal trusses and everything this last week and today as well. So the project is moving along. Item number 8, Budget and Finance. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the receipt of the monthly financial report for November 2019. May I have a motion?
Mr. President, there's also number B.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
That we lumped together.
And I will say the item B is the approve the disposal of fixed assets.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Probably a well-used Chevy van that we
I'm sure.
A few miles.
Mr. Filo, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes, motion is carried. Okay, moving along, administrative reports and superintendent's recommendations. On page 2, and we follow across. The only thing I would, well, let's get a motion first. May I have a motion?
Motion?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Second, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Browning. The only thing I wanted to say is point out the resignations, some of those. We do like to thank these people for serving with us. Sorry that they're leaving, but for whatever reason, that do happen. But we appreciate all their hard work. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I'll do that after I do this one here.
Okay.
So, with a roll call, please.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next item, the superintendent would greatly appreciate accept the following gifts and donations. Ms. Blandino, it seems like it's been the way it's been done in the past, but the freshman gets to read off the donations, please.
Read off the donations,
Page
which.
4.
Page 4.
Page 4.
Gotcha.
Page 4D.
Yep.
The donations, Abiding Christ Lutheran Church, just the names of the donor? And the amount. Very good. Items for Homeless Liaison valued at $250. Byron Church Ladies Guild, Thanksgiving meals and hygiene items for the Homeless Liaison valued at $500. Park Hills High School alumni, $183 for the Fairborn Primary Playground Project. Trim's Property Maintenance, $500 for the Homeless Liaison.
Thank you so much. Item E, it is recommended by the superintendent to do a first reading of the following board policies. The board policies are in your attachments, and may I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Blandino. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes, motion carries. Under new business, we have approving a resolution. We have a memorandum of understanding and an approval of a resolution for Mike Eaker to be our representative at the Greene County Career Center. Any questions? If not, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Browning.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
All right, I will comment on the opposing the Ed Choice vouchers, that's something that was snuck into the budgetary process in a not well thought out method, and it uses the state report cards, which are proven to be rather flawed in deciding who can accept these vouchers or who's entitled to these vouchers. So you've got two things that are not well thought out or researched. So what could possibly go wrong with a program like that?
Mr. Filo, may I have a roll call?
Mr. Browning.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Blandino.
Yes.
Ms. Reister.
Yes.
Mr. McCourt.
Yes. Next item is executive session, which there will be no executive session this evening. So moving to the next one would be,
We'll do a recess and go into a work session.
we will recess going into a work session.
It's not
May I have a motion?
anticipated after the, we don't need a motion. to
Oh,
go-
I'm sorry.
To go into work session. We'll take a short recess, a restroom. We'll have a work session to talk about facilities planning. The other action anticipated will be adjournment after that. So,
We're in recess.
We are in recess. Thank you very much.